So it's the 31st of August 2021 and summer is just about hanging in here in Finland. It's still a nice hot sunny day. So the purpose of this video really is just to explain how we got where we currently are at the moment and what could lie ahead for us in the future. So to sort of begin then, what's gone on? I think the story starts quite a long time ago, back in the 1980s, when the UK and much of Europe, Western Europe and North America deindustrialised. And that was all about globalisation. Big corporations moved factories to other countries where wage costs were lower. And that then created a problem, because you don't just lose the jobs, you also lose the incomes that are needed to buy the goods in the factories that have been offshore to places like China and Eastern Europe. So for about 20, 30 years, the solution to that problem was debt. So private households used their property to borrow against, used it effectively as a cash machine, remortgaged, spent the equity on stuff, on imports. Governments also funneled demand into the economy through the welfare state. Much of that was financed not through taxation but through government borrowing. So you had this massive build-up of debt, and of course companies did the same. They also borrowed heavily. So you've got a big pile up of private debt, household and corporate, and then you also had a build-up of government, what's called public sector debt. So in 2008 we hit like a debt saturation point. Households struggle to pay the debts that they already have, because the thing is that if you borrow to consume, that won't increase your income in the long run, but it will increase your debt, and therefore the amount of money that you have to spend on debt interest every month. So if you repeat this cycle of borrowing and spending, what happens is that your expenditure on debt interest goes up and up and up, but your income largely stays the same. And you'll get to a point where households can't pay the interest that they owe on their massive debts from their incomes that have been flatlining, or actually falling in real terms once you take inflation into account. Okay, so we had the crisis of 2008, which was all about households not being able to pay their mortgages, and this created the global financial crisis. So the solution to that crisis was to cut interest rates. That bought some time, because if you cut interest rates, zombie households can struggle on. The big pile of debt that they've got suddenly becomes a little bit more manageable if you cut interest rates. So we then embarked on another round of borrowing and spending, borrowing to purchase imports. And by 2020 there were signs again that households were struggling. The retail sector was contracting. Big chains were closing like Debenhams. Restaurant chains like Jamie's Italian were going bust. The high street was suffering even before this current crisis that we're in now, which for me indicates a lack of disposable income, which is a product of rising debt and too much of household income being spent on debt interest. Obviously a big one is mortgage debt, especially for the UK. Okay, so what can't be repaid won't be repaid. So the people that run Western Europe and North America kind of understand this. There's only two ways out of a debt crisis. One way is to just default on it, but that would cause a massive crisis. The other way is to inflate, so just print the currency and distribute it to households, and that's basically what's been happening since March 2020. The problem with that is it causes inflation, and eventually currency collapse. Your currency becomes worthless. So what that will mean in the not too distant future is that we'll need a new currency, and that new currency will probably be a digital currency issued by central banks. And I'll talk about that another time, I think.